Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today we're talking about Ukraine, Russia, America. A little trifecta of a problem that seems to be unfolding over there in Europe. We've got a phone call that Joe Biden had with the Ukraine President Zelensky. Yesterday, as we were wrapping up the show, these two guys were having a call, and apparently they were trying to work some things out, and it didn't go that well because CNN reported immediately thereafter that a Ukrainian official said that it was a weird call. Didn't go that well. Joe Biden apparently said a bunch of interesting things. We're going to break that down. But after Tapper and CNN reported on this, they then suddenly went on this little bit of a delete spree and then reposted everything. And so it was a weird thing that happened on Twitter yesterday. And a lot of people are calling for the Biden administration to release the transcript. It's a new hashtag out there on the Twitterverse saying that they want to see verbatim what this phone call between the president of Ukraine and the president of the United States had to say to each other. And so we're going to break that down. A little bit of an interesting thing that took place last night. Then we're going to spend some time talking about what the Department of Defense has to say about all this. In particular, General Milley and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, because they had this press briefing today, where they came out and they started to sort of articulate what the context looks like, what the environment looks like. We want to break that down because they're talking a big game, but they're not really doing much on the back end other than, supporting our NATO allies. And so we're trying to see, is this a wag the dog situation? Is this an all bark, no bite situation? Or as they're saying, is this really something that is on the verge of catastrophe? Is it really the situation where the Russians are, building an entire force on the border, meaning that they're going to use it? Or is this all just sort of much ado about nothing? We're going to get into it. And I want you to be a part of the show. The place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. If you're over there, you're going to see that there is a thread where you can drop your questions. It's going to look something just like this. Reminder that we're not using the form anymore. So just drop your questions or your comments down there in the thread, and we'll see if there are any, and then we'll get to them at the end of the show. Super chats also come in on the screen. They look like this. Oh my God, this is awesome. LOL says Cash Friday. $5 super chat there. Cash Friday. Sounds good to me there. Oh my God. Thank you for that. And also, we're on Rumble now, which is highly integrated with our locals community. And so shout out to Vientikis over there, along with Buttercups for You, saying that doing a happy dance in Pennsylvania because they found that they're unconstitutional, the mail-in ballot for any reason, whatever law, which is good news. I might make a video about that one. So good news out of Pennsylvania and elsewhere. And so without any further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Make sure we're on the right slides here. Yes, President Biden, the Ukrainian President Zelensky, they had a phone call. It took place yesterday evening. Of course, we were on the show having a conversation about Judge Stephen Breyer retiring from the Supreme Court, and we were sort of keeping our eyes peered away from global catastrophe, but the President Biden, who is just alert as can be, was on it, ready to go. And so he gets on the phone and says, we're going to call and sort this Ukrainian situation out. Here's what he reported the call sounded like over on Twitter. Says, 6:07 p.m. says, I spoke with Ukrainian President Zelensky to discuss our coordinated diplomatic efforts and reaffirm our support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. He says we're going to respond decisively, along with our allies and partners, if Russia further invades Ukraine. And that sounds pretty good. Okay, there you go. Some nice, steadfast leadership from Joe Biden over there. And basically, right around the same time, actually, this was earlier that day, we have a tweet from the Ukrainian president. Zelensky himself says, had a long call with POTUS, discussed recent diplomatic efforts on de-escalation, and agreed on joint actions for the future. Thanked President Biden for the ongoing military assistance. Possibilities for financial support to Ukraine were also discussed. And you say, okay, well, that sounds nice. We got two guys who were having a call. American president from Ukraine. getting along well, de-escalating the situation. Oh, good. We can all just go back to bed, come out of the bunker, children. Don't have to do the duck and cover. It's not going to be a World War III thing. Joe Biden's in charge. He's got like 3,700 years of diplomatic experience, okay? He's going to sort all this out for us. But after the phone call, CNN reports this. They say a senior Ukrainian official says the Biden-Zelensky call, quote, did not go well. And Biden told Zelensky a Russian invasion is virtually certain, warning the country should prepare for impact. This is from Matt Chance over at CNN. And that was at 8:48. And remember that Joe Biden spoke right around the 6 o'clock hour. Or at least the tweet came from the 6 o'clock hour from the White House. So shortly thereafter, they're saying, uh-oh, this didn't go well. Jake Tapper is having a conversation with Matt Chance from CNN. Here's what he says.
We have breaking news for you in our world lead. A senior Ukrainian official tells CNN that today's phone call between President Biden and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, quote, did not go well.
Uh-oh.
Our source tells CNN that the two disagreed about the immediacy of the threat of a Russian attack on Ukraine.
Yeah, they disagreed.
The White House and Pentagon have been emphatic that they believe an attack could be imminent. We should note the White House just released its own readout of that call, and there was no mention of President Biden's warnings or the two presidents' disagreement.
All right, so he's right about that. So we're going to pause on this real quick. Jake Tapper says that the White House did release a transcript or a readout, right, which is sort of their summary of what happened. And so we're going to take a look at that. So put a pin in that for a minute. But he's saying that one of the prime conversations was centered around the theme that we're going to be studying a lot throughout this show, which is this much ado about nothing? Is this a wag the dog situation, or is this really on the brink of World War, Russian invasion, the collapse of Eastern Europe, the collapse of the world? I don't know. We're going to have to figure this out. But it sounds like Biden, Team Milley, and Team Austin are all really excited about the prospects of a future war. I mean, they're talking a big game. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and everybody, there's going to be repercussions for these Russians if they even think about anything. But then what Tapper said is that President Zelensky is now saying it's actually not that big of a deal, so why don't you just calm down, sir, relax, take it easy over there. Everything's going to be just fine. And so Tapper is asking this guy, this is Chance, Matt Chance, over from CNN, and this is what he is hearing from a Ukrainian official. This is from somebody, so remember, he's not getting this sourcing from the White House. Okay, this came around the back door. Somebody from the Ukraine side, Ukrainian administration, got hold of this data. They were on the other end of the phone, and they passed it along to Matt. Here's what he says.
Agreements. The White House did say Biden underscored America's commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty. CNN's Matthew Chance joins us now live from Kiev, Ukraine, with more. Matthew, what more are you learning about this disagreement on the Biden-Zelensky call? How heated did it get?
Well,
I'm not sure I could characterize how heated it got, but there was definitely a disagreement about the sort of level of risk that the country is facing when it comes to a Russian invasion. On the one hand, you've got President Biden. This is according to an official who briefed me on the conversation that was had on the telephone call this evening. On the one hand, President Biden saying the threat is imminent. I mean, we've heard this before. The Ukrainians pushing back on that, saying that the threat, according to their intelligence analysts, is a bit more ambiguous than that, and it's possible that there won't be an invasion, whereas President Biden apparently telling his Ukrainian counterpart that an invasion was virtually certain later on in February when the ground becomes more frozen in this country. He went on.
All right, so he says two things. Biden saying you're doomed, an invasion is imminent. Nothing you can do about it. The Ukrainian president says, no, it's not. Just so we're clear.
To say that he warned the Ukrainian leader that the capital, Kiev, this city here, could be sacked. And that's the word he apparently used, according to this Ukrainian official, sacked by Russian forces, who he said may attempt to occupy it. There was also some quite bad news delivered, although expected news, I think, delivered by the US president to the Ukrainian side. President Biden, according to this official who briefed me on the conversation, saying that he told the Ukrainian leader that Ukraine would not be getting significantly more military help, that there would be no US troops sent to Ukraine to defend it. We already knew that, of course, but it was reiterated again on this phone call. Also, no sophisticated weapons, further sophisticated weapons delivered to Ukraine from the United States. There would be no progress on NATO, and there would be no sanctions imposed on Russia preemptively. That would only happen once Russia invades. Let me just get this line out, quite impactful, if you forgive me. President Biden telling his counterpart that Ukraine should prepare for impact. So quite
prepare for impact
there from the US leader.
All right, Matthew Chance reporting live for us.
Oh, my goodness. So Matthew Chance is there, CNN, and Joe Biden is apparently on this call. He's just sort of going off on one. Hey, you guys better brace for impact over there, because there is incoming. Our intelligence, which is the best in the world, obviously, it's the United States, says that you're basically doomed. I've got a lot of time in bunkers. I recommend that you go into your bunker and sort of duck and cover while the Russians prepare for total annihilation. And the White House is like, that didn't happen. Now, something very interesting happened on Twitter when this story came out. CNN originally posted that tweet that I showed you about. Then they deleted it, and there was this big delete fest that went on. We're going to break that down in a minute. But I want to just post and show you this. CNN actually did come back, and they're standing by this story because they posted this the 28th, today. All of that, the posts that I showed you previously were well, actually, this is from HKT time and GMT time, so I don't know when this translates, but this came out on the 28th, as far as I can tell, right? It says here, they're standing by their reporting that a call did not go well. White House disputes the account, says that Biden warned Zelensky that an invasion is in fact imminent, or I'm sorry, a distinct possibility, but not anything else other than that. Describing this as a long and frank conversation. And Zelensky restated his position, saying that Russia remains dangerous but ambiguous. He says he's not certain that an attack is going to take place. Senior Ukrainian official told CNN that Biden would not offer more help. Zelensky urged his American counterpart to, quote, calm down the messaging. Ukrainian president saying to America, calm down the messaging, warning that the impact of the panic might wreck their economy. He also said that Ukrainian intelligence sees the threat differently. And they're over there. Ukrainian leader pointed to a recent breakthrough in negotiations with Russia in Paris, saying that he hoped a ceasefire agreement with rebels in eastern Ukraine would be maintained. Also said the talks between U.S., Russia, and NATO still had some distance to run before diplomatic efforts had been exhausted. So he's saying, calm down. Right now, that was posted today, January 28th. Yesterday, when they were just initially reporting this, there was a delete fest that was going on Twitter. You can see that original tweet that I shared with you was gone. So this was posted at 1848 hours on 127 and deleted, right? So they posted this thing. It got 129,000 views and then boom, vanished. Same thing happened at CNN here because this is Natasha Bertrand. She's also over at CNN, and this tweet got deleted because she posted the same thing. She says, per a senior Ukrainian official to Matt Chance, Biden told Zelensky that a Russian invasion of Ukraine now virtually certain, and that Kiev could be sacked and, quote, prepare for impact. Biden reportedly said. Zelensky disagreed, and as I reported, asked him to tone down the rhetoric. Calm down, everybody. Relax. But this tweet also got deleted, not before people were screen grabbing it, right? But this was the article that they were referencing. In response, official told CNN, we just basically read most of that because it came from Matthew Chance, but it went out and then it all got sort of brought back. We see that at right about the same time, this person over from CNN, Alexander Marquardt, was reporting the same thing, sacked and prepare for impact. But then the White House came out and says, nope, they are disputing this. And so this was like this little battle that was taking place yesterday because all of Twitter was saying, uh-oh, this call went really bad. And then the White House people started to come back out and to sort of rebut that argument. And so they say, this is what their readout says. And we're going to sort of go through this, but it says, here's how the White House says the Zelensky call went. Let's read through it. It says, President Joe Biden spoke with Zelensky of Ukraine. President Biden reaffirmed the readiness of the United States, along with its allies, to respond decisively if Russia further invades Ukraine. Also underscored the commitment of the United States to Ukraine's sovereignty and integrity, said that Ukraine has been provided over $500 million from the U.S., along with humanitarian assistance, exploring additional macroeconomic support, President Biden made clear that despite the departure of American family members of embassy personnel, U.S. Embassy in Kiev remains open and operational. Leaders discussed coordinated efforts, underscoring the principle of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Biden relayed the United States' support for conflict resolution efforts, expressing hopes and sides of recommitment and decreased tensions and advance the implementation of the Minsk agreements. Okay, I didn't see anything in there about buckle up, buddy boy, because it's about to be a Mad Max environment out there. Didn't see any of that in there. So you can see maybe why the White House is a little bit panicked about that message going out. That Biden is saying, oh, you better brace for impact because it's coming in and it's coming in hot. Emily Horn, she's a spokesperson for the White House National Security Council, says this is not true. Alexander Marquardt from CNN is reporting a Russian invasion is now virtually certain once the ground freezes, Biden said to Zelensky. Virtually certain once the ground freezes. Kiev could be sacked. Russian forces may attempt to occupy it and to prepare for impact. White House says, no, that's not true. President Biden said that there is a distinct possibility that the Russians could invade Ukraine. He has previously said this publicly. We've been warning about this for months. Reports of anything more or different are completely false. Same thing here. Jim Sciutto at CNN says that he's hearing that anonymous sources are, quote, leaking falsehoods, which is, I guess, to their company, right? Because that's where Matthew Chance is from. President Biden said that there is a, quote, distinct possibility Russians could invade, said that for months. Also said, no one said the word sacked. The only person who should be sacked is the anonymous source who is circulating the inaccurate portrayal of this conversation. So nobody knows what really happened. Now, Zelensky's spokesperson, so of course we can see what they have to say about it. They're disagreeing with it. So you can see their statement. And in English, it's down here below. Ukraine says, dear colleagues, some reports regarding the content of the talks between Zelensky and Biden have appeared on social media, citing, quote, an alleged senior Ukrainian official. These messages are completely false. Correct information can only be found in official releases from Ukrainian and American sides. Everything else is suppositions and speculations. In this troubled time, we ask that you treat every piece of information as responsibly as possible and publish only carefully verified data. So then, as I mentioned, CNN had, let me move me over there. As I mentioned, CNN had deleted the tweet, and then they reposted it about an hour and 20 minutes later with this. Okay, Ukrainian official describes Zelensky phone call. Note, since this report, White House and Zelensky spokesman have disputed official claims. So they could say, well, we just deleted it because it wasn't verified. But then they reposted it. And this was after Twitter went bananas. The Columbia Bugle, great Twitter follow, by the way, says if Posobiec, also a great Twitter follow, says hadn't called out CNN, they would have never reposted this. And I think he's absolutely right about this. They basically got, I think, nabbed on this. And so this hashtag went totally viral last night. Hashtag release the transcript. It was trending #1 on Twitter before CNN reposted it. Columbia Bugle, once again, sort of detailing this for us. You can see here in politics, #1 on trending last night. Hashtag release the transcript, right? Because it's a pretty important phone call, obviously. It's the president of the United States, the president of Ukraine. We're talking about a global war. We're talking about a potential World War III environment. And, there's sort of a precedent for having people release transcripts, or at least, people demanding that presidents release transcripts, especially when they're on the phone call with the Ukrainian President Zelensky. In fact, Joe Biden made a similar demand previously. House Republicans made note of this. They went back and they found this tweet from CNN, September 21st, 2019. It says, Joe Biden calls on President Trump to release the transcript of the call with the Ukrainian President Zelensky. So he wants Trump to release the transcript of the call, Joe Biden demanding it be released. And he did there. I don't think I clipped the clip for some reason. But we see that Joe Biden, hey, look at this. Here's Ducey back here, right? Saying, hey, release the transcript. President demanding it. Kamala Harris wanted it released too. Trump raised Biden in a call with the Chinese president. Kamala says, release the transcript. And so, of course, we'll see if they'll be making those same demands now that it involves their administration. I doubt it. All right. And so let's take a listen in and check in with Ukrainian President Zelensky. I think I have about 4 minutes of him. Let's break this down and see what he has to say about all this.
And we are grateful to the United States for their ongoing support to our sovereignty and territorial integrity. But I'm the president of Ukraine.
I'm the president.
Based here, and I think I know the details deeper than any other president. The question is not about the U.S. president, because, well, we do understand what the risks are and which of those risks are priority.
All right. I am here in Ukraine. I know what's going on better than the president does. And so if there's going to be sort of this, battle of intelligence, I think I'm going to default on my side. I'm sitting right here. He's on a different continent, a long ways away. Here is what he's saying.
Risks, and we've discussed lots of questions. I would like to explain this a little bit. It's important that the president should know the situation from me, not from the intermediaries. He knows the situation from me personally, and
don't listen to your DOD.
We'll have another conversation in a couple of weeks as well, but it's important not only for our intelligence community and secret services to exchange information. People need to be here and understand all the details. I understand you are here. I don't know how long you have been here. But when journalists or respected politicians come to us, I always invite them to Donbass, because I think that having an opinion about Donbass and a contact line can be done fairly only by those people who are there, who are walking on that ground.
All right, so in other words, stop sticking your nose in our business if you don't really know what is happening here on the ground. And so that sort of leads you to believe that maybe, there's a little bit more to that alleged conversation from the Ukrainian official than maybe the White House would imply, because he kind of seems like he's a little bit agitated, doesn't he? Like he just got told by somebody else what his business is. And nobody likes to be told what their business is, because most people know what their business is. And if somebody else wants to tell him what it is, that's not really appropriate. And so he kind of seems like that. He kind of seems like a little bit agitated. Biden said a lot of stuff last night, but he's not here. And so regardless of what he thinks is happening, I know the reality. Here we have another clip from Mr. Zelensky. Here is this one.
We need unity of our people. People have to be certain and sure in their army, in their president. The people should trust their government and their special services. We are grateful for any support, but this varied information from varied sources cannot mislead our country, because this raises economic panic. I just give you the example of how much it costs.
Panic.
We have the record-breaking GDP in 2021, record-breaking number. We have the growth. In a short period of time, we had about almost 6.5 of new investments in 2021. But after, I think, after the beginning of this informational coverage,
watch.
After this change in the information coverage, 12.5 billion has taken worth of investments were taken out of Ukraine, and from our
12 billion investments
reserves, which is the highest in the last 10 years. Our country, and you understand, we can't handle this alone. From the public reserves, from the state reserves, we have to take money in to stabilize our national currency.
Yeah. So, a lot of economic reasons for this, right? Why are different sides and different entities wanting to puff some of this stuff up? The President Biden had a lot of history with Ukraine, specifically had that one clip talking about, his involvement with Ukraine prosecutors and his son and Burisma and all sorts of stuff. And now you see that there are already catastrophic consequences Ukraine President Zelensky says very clearly, we had a rockin' and rollin' GDP. The economy was humming. Things were moving along quite nicely here until this informational coverage started to shift. And I noticed this. We've talked about this here. We talked about this on Locals. We said this very clearly, that it felt like they just pulled this Ukraine situation out of a hat. They just said, oh, well, we're going to war now. I guess we got nothing else to talk about. Everything that we've touched has been a catastrophe. And so we're just going to go stick our noses in something. That's why everybody has been saying wag the dog. It's not a unique position. It's not it's quite obvious, which is why everybody is calling it out. And we sort of watched that shift change. And Ukrainian President Zelensky noticed it too. He said, we were humming along here until suddenly they started to say, well, this is going to be the epicenter of World War III. Then all of the investment pulled out. Everything is sort of, economically in shambles. He's telling everybody, calm down. Our intelligence is not even concerned about this. Biden is having a panic attack, level alert, red October happening. And now he's just saying, hey, just turn the volume down, everybody. Relax. Somebody, get Joe Biden an ice cream cone, for crying out loud. So now we got to check back in with our military industrial complex, with our DOD, because they're so, competent based on what they have performed thus far. And so we're going to spend some time on this. We've got Lloyd Austin. We've got General Milley. Do you remember these two people the last time we talked about them? Oh my goodness, it was a long time ago. And it was a pretty bad situation then. This isn't that bad now. I mean, K. Bean noticed in the chat that at least they're evacuating Americans first now. We're actually going to get to that because General Milley's like, well, hey, look, there's an order in place telling them not to come. I mean, if they come, what do you want me to do about it? And somebody's comparing this situation to Afghanistan. And so let's take a listen now to our very estimable, very brave, and I got to hand it to Lloyd Austin. He's really being bold here today. He doesn't have any face masks on, no face shield on, and so he means business. Let's get to it. Here he is going to tell us what's going on with this entire situation.
To everybody, I'm really glad to be with you. I know you're covering the situation in Europe closely, and so I want to update you on what the department's doing to support Ukraine and to uphold our ironclad commitment to our NATO allies. As you know, for months now, Russia has been deploying forces to Crimea and along Ukraine's border, including in Belarus. It has progressed at a consistent and steady pace involving tens of thousands of Russian troops. And it is being supported by increased Russian naval activity in the northern Atlantic and the Mediterranean Sea. While we don't believe that President Putin has made a final decision to use these forces against Ukraine, he clearly now has that capability.
Has the capability.
And there are multiple options available to him, including the seizure of cities and significant territories, but also coercive acts or provocative political acts like the recognition of breakaway territories. Indeed, we're seeing Russian state media spouting off now about alleged activities in eastern Ukraine. Now, this is straight out of the Russian playbook.
Oh, straight out of it.
He knows.
Us. They're not fooling us.
We remain focused on Russian disinformation, including the potential creation of pretext for further invasion or strikes on Donbass.
I think they're LARPing.
And any Russian attack or further incursion into Ukraine would not only ignite conflict, it would also violate the bedrock principles of national sovereignty, territorial integrity,
territorial integrity,
self-determination.
And self-determination. Okay, so territorial integrity, self-determination, humanitarian things that we were building in Afghanistan that we said are not that important, they're suddenly very important now. And so he knows the Russian playbooks, boys and girls. Don't you think for a second that old Pooty Poo is going to get one over here on Lloyd Austin, because he knows their playbook like the back of his hand. And they're not being fooled by any of this. Now, he also said that, fortunately or unfortunately for the United States and Ukraine, Putin has a lot of options. He can take whole cities if he wants to, because they just amassed gigantic swaths of Russian forces right there on the border. And so as we go through this, I've got a lot of different clips here, but I want to share a concept called a disconnect theory. Okay, this is something we use in the law. a disconnect case, an example might be a DUI case. Okay, so let's just take your generic hypothetical DUI case. Somebody is arrested and they're charged with a DUI, and we get the blood results back. And the blood results are very high. Let's say a 0.25, okay, very high. Somebody is, 3-4 times the legal limit, and they should be, according to the numbers, very, very drunk. They should be stumbling and falling all over themselves because of that number. But let's say that when they do their field sobriety test, when an officer is sort of interfacing with them, they don't make that appearance at all. They don't look like they're drunk at all. They perform the field sobriety test. Maybe they fail one or two things because everybody fails one or two things because they're sort of made for that. But let's say that everything kind of looks pretty good. And you say, well, one of these things just doesn't sort of match the other. We know that this person got charged with this very high level DUI, but a lot of the physical signs and symptoms just don't match that number. And so what the government is saying doesn't match the reality that we're observing. They're alleging that this is the truth, but your own eyes and ears don't support that. And so this is an actual strategy, right, that lawyers will use with jurors. They'll say, hey, okay, they're telling you this, and you can see on the chart that this person should basically be vomiting all over themselves, but they're not. That's weird. Why might that be? Well, maybe because they got those blood vials mixed up. Maybe because their tests are not accurate, right? Maybe because they have a problem with precision versus accuracy when you're talking about quantifying data. Oh, I don't know. All sorts of things could go wrong, but use your eyes, ladies and gentlemen. You can see very clearly here that there is a disconnect because they just don't fit. And as we go through this analysis with the DOD, kind of take a look at that to see whether or not this matches. Because what he is saying is that this is a pretty big problem, and this is going to be a pretty big catastrophe, and America is united. And we're going to be supporting our allies from Austin and from Milley and from everybody else in the administration. But then we're going to listen to what they're actually doing. And we're going to say, does the statements match the actions, or is there a disconnect here? Here is Lloyd Austin. We've got another clip where he is saying, we're doing three things right now. We know there's 100,000 troops popping up, and we've got to make sure that we're ready to go. So we're working on three efforts, all underway.
So let me be clear on where things stand today. First, conflict is not inevitable. There is still time and space for diplomacy. The United States, in lockstep with our allies and partners, has offered Russia a path away from crisis and toward greater security.
You did?
And the Department of Defense will continue to support those diplomatic efforts.
Okay, good. So number one, diplomacy. Got it.
Second, the United States remains committed to helping Ukraine defend itself through security assistance material.
Okay, assistance.
And since 2014, we've committed more than $2.7 billion in security assistance to Ukraine.
To another country.
And that includes more security assistance to Ukraine in the past year, $1 million, than at any previous time. And so in December, President Biden authorized $200 million in assistance, which included additional javelins and other anti-armor weapons, grenade launchers, large quantities of artillery and small arms ammunition.
Did they get that from Afghanistan? Did they go pick that up from over there?
Those deliveries are ongoing.
Or are those new?
Indeed,
from
another shipment just arrived today.
Yeah, so the $80 billion
Third,
left
the
in
United States
Afghanistan
will stand shoulder to shoulder with our NATO allies. And that includes reinforcing security on NATO's eastern flank. And as you know, we placed thousands of U.S. troops on prepared to deploy orders earlier this week.
Thousands of troops.
If NATO activates its response forces, these troops will be ready to go.
Ready to go. 8,500 troops.
Now, the situation on Ukraine's borders is changing rapidly. But as we look ahead, there are a couple of things that we can count on.
All right, so he keeps going on. I have another clip here. So now listen. Okay, so here's where we're going to see a pretty big serious disconnect. So obviously he just said in the very first clip, very serious situation, Russia amassing all sorts of forces, and we're going to help our NATO allies, blah 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 blah. But also then sort of we're going to be mobilizing. We've got 8,500 troops, and diplomacy is still number one. But all that being said, diplomacy. All that being said, Article 5 is very clear. If the Russians even think about attacking one of our allies, Biden says this thing is a sacred obligation, and we are going to stand by that commitment. Here's what Lloyd Austin says.
Article 5 is clear on this point.
Okay, so if it's
An
sacred...
attack against one NATO member is an attack against us all.
Okay.
And as President Biden has said, the United States holds this as a sacred obligation.
Sacred obligation.
And we will do right by that commitment. And Mr. Putin can do the right thing as well. There's no reason that this situation has to devolve into conflict. He can choose to de-escalate. He can order his troops away. He can choose dialogue and diplomacy. Whatever he decides, the United States will stand with our allies and partners.
Stand with our allies and partners. So, you know, it just doesn't seem like it's like there's much bark there. I'm sorry, like there's much bite there. A lot of bark. We're going to stand with our partners. We're going to stand with our allies. But also, you know, Putin can do whatever he wants to do. And he's got a lot of options here because he just has 100,000 troops plus amassed on the border that he can sort of use as he pleases. So not a lot of real energy there in terms of, I think, much of anything, to be honest. He turns it over to Milley. Here's what Milley says.
Ukraine has the right to be independent, and they have been an independent country since 1991. Russia signed the Budapest Memorandum in 1994 with the United States and Great Britain that guaranteed the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine.
That military cadence.
It's the policy of the United States government to continue to support an independent Ukraine in their goals. And we are continuing our effort to enhance their ability to protect themselves. We strongly encourage Russia to stand down and to pursue a resolution through diplomacy. Armed force should always be the last resort.
Last resort. Yeah, I agree with that. I think we all agree with that. Nobody wants to be in another war for 25 years, especially with Russia, when these guys can't even get the equipment out of Afghanistan. So, yeah, you're right there, Milley. Nobody wants any additional war, for goodness sake. One Florida man just joined us on Local, says, as far as I'm concerned, let Ukraine deal with their own problems. I don't know why we have so many people who are so concerned about it, but the United States, of course, is. Here is Milley now. So now, again, we're talking disconnect theory, disconnect case. 8,500 troops. We've got Lloyd Austin saying, you know, that we're going to kind of help, but not really help. Here's Milley now going to be describing the actual landscape of the theater of war, in other words. And Russia is like arming up big time, according to our own intelligence. Here's what he says.
The Russian Federation has amassed upwards at this time of over 100,000 ground forces, air forces, naval forces, special forces, cyber, electronic warfare, command and control, logistics, engineers, and other capabilities along the Ukraine border.
Yeah, that's everybody.
Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe with a population of 44 million. It's divided in the middle by the river Dnipro. Prominent terrain includes flat, open plains, and there are abundance of rivers and lakes, and there's a high water table. When that high water table freezes, it makes it for optimal conditions for cross-country tracked and wheeled vehicle maneuver. The city of Kiev has a population of nearly 3 million people. Other major population centers include Kharkiv or Kharkov, Donetsk, Odessa, Dnipro, and Lviv in the west. There are many people and highly dense population centers throughout Ukraine. And if war were to break out on a scale and scope that is possible, the civilian population will suffer immensely.
They'll suffer, and there's 3 million people over there, and of course, we got to think about all those people. You know, you don't want to leave a country of people helpless anywhere in the world. You certainly don't want to do that, and so we got to think about them in terms of military and the Russian, geopolitical strategy. You don't want other countries like China or Russia to go in and, fill a power vacuum or like like a terrorist organization either. Like, what if a terrorist organization like got control of land and $80 billion worth of military equipment, like hypothetically speaking, like maybe like the Taliban or a group like that? That would be a big stinking problem, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen again. And so thank goodness we've got Milley there to help make sure that we're in good care. But even though, he continues, and we're going to skip over a big portion of this, but he is talking about Ukraine and their capabilities, and I'm sure they're very competent and very capable, but he's saying that, quite frankly, it's not going to be enough, and that's why they need help. And that's why the U.S., in the face of this burgeoning Russian force that we just heard from Milley, is basically everybody. It's the whole military. They called and they said, you're up. And he said, me? Yeah, you. As well as everybody else in your bunker. Get them all up, suited up. We're going to Ukraine. And all that being said, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to send some small advisors over there. And they're also not going to be doing really anything else. No bases, no forward bases, no offense, only training, advising, and assisting. Because I think that's going to cut it, I guess. Here's Milley.
But they need additional help to defend themselves, especially from an invasion force the size that Russia is currently massing. If Russia chooses to invade Ukraine, it will not be cost-free in terms of casualties or other significant effects. There is a small contingent of U.S. and NATO advisors and trainers currently in Ukraine. The United States has zero offensive combat weapon systems, nor any permanent forces nor bases in Ukraine.
No bases, no
Our
forward.
role is limited in that we help train, advise, and assist with tactics, techniques, and procedures. We participate in institutional development of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. As the Secretary of Defense has noted, we continue to provide military material support to Ukraine, along with many other countries from NATO. And we are ready, capable, and prepared to uphold our obligation under treaty to NATO. As mentioned by the Secretary, an attack against one NATO ally is an attack against all.
It's like, what are you talking about? He said all of that in the same sentence. An attack on one NATO ally, right, which Ukraine, right, is not an official member of NATO, but they are sort of in the Explorer program. They're like, hey, we're curious about how this all works. Like, can we come hang out with you guys? And they're like, yeah, well, yeah, you can come hang out with us. Like, we're not sure about you yet, but like they're having a conversation, right? They're at the cocktail table. They're going, hey, what's up? What's going on? What's your name? Where are you from? And so Russia's not happy about that. And so Milley's saying, if you attack any one of us or any one of our allies, then you are in big trouble. In fact, you're in such big trouble that we've already mobilized big portions of our efforts to stop you, and that consists of the entire might of the American military, which is mostly some advisors that we're sending over in none of our forward operating bases. We've got no offensive capabilities there. We've got no combat capabilities there. We haven't actually even deployed anybody over there. But just rest assured that if you do attack, that there's going to be some sort of consequence. It's actually laughable, like that he said it in the same sentence. Wild. All right. So reporters are now asking them some questions. They're saying, hey, fearless leaders out there, Russia kind of doesn't seem like they want to compromise on any of this. And since you are so involved in this, are you concerned at all that if you do mobilize troops, since you haven't yet, that would give Putin an excuse to do something more? Here's how that sounds.
Russia, even today, has said they see little room for compromise right now. Does sending additional U.S. forces to that region hand Putin an excuse to make an incursion into Ukraine?
Well, thanks, Lita. I think you can assume that any time that we think about troop movements, we always consider the impact that that's going to have.
Good answer. Very good political non-answer.
On leaders' minds.
Yeah, we think about what we do.
And their decision making.
That's great.
I just made 2 points, and you raised this earlier. We haven't actually moved any troops.
Oh, you haven't done anything.
We put troops on higher alert.
8,500, we know.
And the second point that I would make, Lita, is that even if and when we do move troops, the purpose of those troops deploying would be to reassure allies.
Reassure allies.
Directly in support of NATO or both.
Okay, so we're going to get into this a little bit further, but as we're going to learn,
In terms of
I think we have a question about this, but they are basically doubling down and saying that there's not going to be any combat from American troops. They're just going to be there to support the NATO troops. And so U.S. soldiers are not going to be in harm's way, in other words, which is great news, obviously, because nobody wants American troops to go over there and get engaged, involved in something that we've got no business in, or have any real clear interest in that nobody has articulated to me or anybody else, as far as I can tell, other than, there are global NATO allies, whatever that means. So here we're going to see that now they're sort of speculating about the Russian buildup. They've got a lot of forces there, Milley. You just said so. Could they just invade the entire country? I mean, is it literally that many? And here's what he says.
In terms of the size of the forces that are amassed right now, they could. It's potential. We don't think there's been a decision, as the Secretary already made that point. But sure, with 100,000 troops and
100,000,
you've got combined arms formations, ground maneuver, artillery, rockets, you got air, and all the other piece parts that go with it.
Whatever they want.
There's a potential that they could launch on very, very little warning. That's possible.
Sure is.
And there's a wide scale of options that are available to Russian leadership. And the best option they should pick, in my view, is a diplomatic solution to resolve whatever differences they have.
Yeah.
In terms of how this...
He's like, yeah, the best solution for them, if they know what's good for them, diplomacy. After he just got done saying that they have absolute, unequivocal superiority in the entire theater, such that they could invade and just take over the entire country. But he's warning them the best option is diplomacy. It is his best option, certainly, because there's nothing that they can do about it. They've been all bark, but no bite. They know that, and they're getting called out on it, basically, because they know they're not going to do anything because they're totally disconnected. Their rhetoric doesn't match their reality. Let's continue on. Somebody asks Milley, hey, Milley, is this like normal, business in your world? Is this what you're regularly used to? You've seen all sorts of other incidents. What do you think about this deal?
In terms of how this feels, Helene, your second part of the question, as we look at that number of troops and that amount of hardware that's in the border region, it far and away exceeds what we typically see them do for exercises. And so it's very concerning. Where this could lead us in terms of a type of conflict, or where it could put the region in terms of future activities, I won't bother to speculate on that. Helene, I would just say that we're focused on making sure that we do our part to provide the president options to support and reinforce NATO if, in fact, he does make a decision.
Far and away exceeds what we typically see for exercises. This is a pretty big deal. They've got total superiority. There's not too much we can do about it, but we're just going to continue to, I guess, monitor the situation and come out here and beat a drum that we promise we'll do something if we have to, but probably won't. In fact, we're telling you that we're not going to do anything. We're telling you right now, none of our troops are going to be used in combat. Here's Milley. Here's Austin.
As you've indicated, David, the president's been real clear.
He's been clear.
That he does not intend to put combat troops into Ukraine for the purpose of conducting combat operations.
Great. Good. So why is he talking like he is?
Any troops that we deploy, if we deploy troops to the region, or those troops that are already in the region, have multiple capabilities. And so as we conduct our planning, we always look at a range of options that we may have to pursue. But again, to the point that you made earlier, David, the president has been clear about not employing troops in Ukraine for combat purposes.
Okay, so that is an look. I'm not a military tactician expert. I'm not, like Napoleon or Ulysses S. Grant or George Washington or any of these people. I don't know, but I think that one of the sort of things that you don't do is tell your opponent exactly what you're going to do or what you're not going to do. Like, for example, if you're going to send Joe Biden out and Kamala Harris out at press conferences to say that if Putin does anything even remotely, if he looks at us wrong, we're going to respond and there are going to be serious consequences. If you say that, like, that has some meaning to it. If you say something like, we're going to respond and there are going to be serious consequences, but we're not going to do anything meaningful with those consequences, it has a little bit less bite. It's like if you try to harm me, I will punch you back to defend myself. Versus if you try to harm me, I will stand here and take it very angrily. And I'll threaten to punch you, but I'm not going to defend myself at all. Right? One just doesn't feel quite like the other. And I think, unfortunately, America is the latter at this moment. So Biden confirming absolutely not going to happen. No combat troops, which is great. Like, I'm happy about that. That's really good news. Thankfully, that's the case. But I'm not sure why they're beating the drum like it's going to be World War III then. Now, other people are saying, we having deja vu on this thing. We remember another country where stuff like this kind of happened, and there was this like slow-moving train wreck. And you guys kept telling us that everything was fine and it was all going to work out. And under no condition is there going to be people flying out of embassies on helicopters. Okay, never happened. Turns out it did. And as a bonus, there were people falling out of aircraft wheel wells to top it off. And so they're saying, hey, Milley, you kind of are like 0 for 1 on this foreign war thing here under this current administration. You think that's going to be a problem this go round? Because we've got another embassy over there. You taking care of the people over there, the Americans?
The State Department has issued out travel advisories. Those are in effect right now. And those advisories say, where's the effect of don't travel to Ukraine if American citizen? And if you're in Ukraine, you should consider leaving Ukraine.
Yeah, we remember that in
Go
Afghanistan.
to the State Department website and see what they've put up.
Yeah, just go to the website.
Advisories before Afghanistan, too. And it didn't forestall an evacuation crisis.
You tried that before. Didn't work.
That's also correct.
He says that's also correct. Yeah.
Rest assured, David, that whatever task the United States military is called upon to accomplish, we'll be prepared to do it.
No, you will not. I doubt. Well, look, maybe you will. Hopefully you will. I mean, you learned the last go round. Oh, that clip is just so stinking painful. I can't even take it. He says, oh, you mean the same travel advisories? The same process that you used in Afghanistan, you're doing that again here? And he said, that didn't work out too well. And Milley says, yes, that's true. It didn't. And then Austin says, but we're ready to do whatever it takes. Oh, my goodness. Rough stuff. Now, we get a very good question, one that I posed previously. Are you supposed to tell your opponent what you're exactly doing? Are you supposed to communicate that? Are you supposed to say, there are going to be serious consequences, but we're not going to do anything that actually hurts you? In other words, there will not actually be serious consequences. Are you supposed to do that? I didn't think so. And neither did this reporter asking this question.
Yes, hi, I have a question for both of you. To Secretary Austin, President Biden's decision to rule out deploying U.S. forces to combat Russia early in the crisis must have impacted Putin's calculus in some way. How do you assess that it's impacted his calculus? And do you have any concerns about pursuing a strategy other than ambiguity and as far as deterrence goes? And
strategic ambiguity, right? Strategic ambiguity being that you don't dictate to your enemy exactly what you're doing. You say, hey, look, we got a whole range of options. Put a pin in this because we're going to see the Russians do this in a clip here in a couple slides. But here, Austin is being asked about that specifically. Here is the next part of this guy's question.
If President Biden responds by deploying U.S. troops in NATO's eastern flank or with economic sanctions, how do you anticipate that Russia will retaliate? How are you preparing for potential retaliation in Europe, and how are you preparing for potential retaliation against the homeland, perhaps by Russian use of
So listen
cyber
for these
warfare?
non-answers.
Thanks, Phil.
So remember the first question. Did you and your administration's telegraphing of your strategy, did that have anything to do with what Putin is doing with his strategy? Here's what Lloyd Austin says.
I won't speculate about what or how President Putin is thinking. I think that's been the question that everybody has. You know, what if he did something like this? What would he possibly want to achieve?
Yeah.
So I won't speculate on that. I would say that our focus is to make sure that whatever happens, we're prepared to reassure our allies in the region and support NATO's efforts. And of course, this is about NATO and the alliance. And I would remind you that NATO is a defensive alliance. Again, you've heard the chairman talk about the resources that NATO has, and I think they are considerable resources. And again, it's important to make sure that we keep the alliance united.
Keep the alliance united. Going to support our allies and all of that good stuff. And so that reporter is basically asking him, hey, you know, do you think that you guys kind of punked yourself when you disclosed everything to Putin? Because it kind of feels like you kind of punked yourself, because this kind of is a problem here. And he's saying, oh, I'm not going to speculate on people who are dunking on us, which, of course, nobody wants to admit that. So here's Milley. I think this is the last clip from this press briefing, and then we'll hear from the Russians. But we've got Milley now saying, we're all going to be safe here at home. We're extremely competent. Don't worry about any homeland problems. You're safe, America. Milley's in charge.
With respect to your question about the homeland and cyber and all of that, we have capabilities. I'm not going to go into them here at the microphone, but we've got a significant amount of capabilities to defend and do whatever's necessary to protect the homeland.
All right. So I feel better. I mean, I'm resting assured tonight that these two guys are in charge. Whoo! It's going to be a nice one. Now, Reuters reported this afternoon that Ukraine tells the West, dial down the Russian war talk. We heard a little bit about this previously. We're going to hear from the Russians next. So we've got Ukraine's president wants weapons and loans at a time of problems with Moscow. One thing he does not want from the West is more panic-inducing warnings that Russia is about to attack. This is from Reuters this afternoon. Western leaders like Biden and Prime Minister Boris Johnson have for weeks spoken about what they say is, quote, a credible and urgent threat of a new Russian invasion after Russian massed troops nearby. Moscow says it has no intentions and it can deploy and drill its own troops on its own territory as it sees fit. You know, because over there in Russia, they say that we've got a problematic border, and so they just send their entire military over there. Ours, we just send Kamala Harris to a couple countries southern of the border, and she deals with, I don't know what she deals with down there, but useless. The warnings have taken their economic toll. Ukraine's currency tumbled, lowest level against the dollar since 2015, economics, while bonds fell into distress territory in January. An advisor to the president in Ukraine says constant and emotional messages in the media about how a big war is going to start tomorrow or on the day after tomorrow or the day after that create economic risks. And so calm down, stop wagging the dog. Enough of this. Here is what the Russians say about this whole situation. I didn't catch this guy's name. He's a Russian minister. This is our last clip, and then we'll jump into questions and super chats. Here is Russia. Now, this is translated, and so we'll I think it's 2 minutes. Let's listen.
If it depends on us, the Russian Federation, there will be no war.
No war.
We don't want war, but we will not allow violating our interests. And ignoring our interests, we will not allow either.
Well,
today, I'm going to send official requests to all my colleagues asking directly to explain, officially, how they are planning to fulfill their obligations, which their countries took on the highest level, under the current historical circumstances. Our president already said that if our attempts to negotiate suitable security guarantees in Europe don't happen, we will respond.
Yeah.
Answering the direct question about what kind of response it could
Listen.
be, he said, any kind. My decision will be based on our military leaders' proposals.
All right. So did you see how that worked there? So He says, listen, we don't want a war, but we have security interests. And if our security interests are being jeopardized, well, there's going to be a response from us. And they say, well, what kind of response? What does that mean? Are you going to go to war? Now, when Joe Biden got that question, Joe Biden said, oh, no. We're just going to support our allies, and we're not actually going to send any troops over there. We're not going to do these things. And what did this guy say? He said, oh, what kind of response? Whatever kind of response is necessary, my friends. And I'm going to listen to the military advisors who make those types of decisions to educate me about that type of response, right? Strategic ambiguity versus, open, transparent, international diplomacy or military diplomacy. I think it's sort of diplomacy without any real bite. So is it actually diplomacy, or is it just sort of empty-handed gestures and useless negotiation? Probably that. Let's check back in with the Russian. I think this is, somebody says Lazarov. Let's listen to what he says before we jump into the questions.
Obviously, other ministries and agencies will take part in preparing such proposals. The interagency preparation is underway over the US and NATO answers to our proposals. Everyone knows what these answers are already. Comparing the answers we've got from NATO, the Americans' ones are the example of diplomatic decency.
Americans?
Because NATO's answers are so ideology-driven. It is so filled up with the exclusivity of the Northern Atlantic Alliance, its special mission and destiny. I felt a little bit ashamed for the people who wrote it.
Ducking on NATO.
The next meeting, I expect, will be in a couple of weeks.
Couple of weeks.
But the Americans are now trying to bargain, They said that our ambassador needs at least 12 people's staff serving his needs.
What?
If this boorishness continues, we have some reserves to make our diplomatic presence even.
What? Well, I think they were sort of upset about their ambassador needing a big staff, or the American ambassador needing a big staff. I don't know what's going on there. But he says he doesn't want war. I know that I don't want war. Pretty sure that most Americans don't want war. So hopefully they're able to sort this whole thing out. We'll see. Let's take a look at some questions over from our friends at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I am going to pull this up right now. Oh my goodness, we have a lot of them. Let's see what we've got here. We've got, yes, okay, we've got Miss Lucky and Sergeant Bob are in the house. Says, could Sleepy Joe be crying wolf? I think that he absolutely is. I think that this is a wag the dog situation. They need something else to talk about, and this is it. We can see it's a disconnect because the rhetoric doesn't match the reality. They're saying that they're going to do a bunch of stuff, but they're not actually doing anything. Former LEO says the Democrats will find a way to blame Trump, and that document from the White House is a fictional account of what Mushbrain said rather than what he did say. Biden is an accident, looking for a place to happen. Biden is trying to do the same thing to Ukrainian that he's doing to us, and I wish he would use protection. Former LEO, it's a good comment. Bring in Hunter, says Miss Lucky, with his expertise and connections. He can save the Ukraine. Sergeant Bob. He's the smartest man Joe Biden knows, and he's worth, I think, like $50,000 a month for his knowledge. Yeah, maybe he can come in here and help solve this problem. Kenny 1B says Russia has a very long history of using denial and deception methods and false flags, little green men, and so forth. And there was a part of this presser where they actually did talk about that. They said something like, they've got intelligence and they're sort of prognosticating that they may try something like that. And we just heard from the Russian minister that he's thinking that this is going to go on for several weeks. So we'll see if anything comes of it. We have a couple super chats that came in from YouTube. We have a Berry Cream, yes please, says, I wonder if Biden is getting his intel from Adam Schiff, little Adam Schiff, or from, who's the other guy? Fang Fang. The guy that went bang bang with Fang Fang, which I don't know if that's racist, but a lot of people are saying that on the interweb. So I don't know. It's hard to tell. we'll leave that one there. Couples from Humphrey and from Henry Dixon's in the house says, where is Hunter? It's a good question. He's probably painting, Henry. He's probably painting a self-portrait, maybe in the nude, with his crack pipe. Who knows? Ronnie Cole, and another one from Humphrey. Thank you, Humphrey. Ronnie Cole says, Congressman Schiff has the evidence. Have no fear. That's good, Congressman Schiff. Pencilneck has the evidence. Thank you for that, Ronnie. And Barry Cream, yes, please, says, also, isn't Joe Biden the guy who got caught red-handed trying to pressure the then Afghanistan president to lie to his people about the withdrawal? Look, Joe Biden has been basically, I think, poisoning the pool of the globe, internationally speaking, for however long he's been in the Senate, which is a very long time. Thunder 7 says, it strikes me as really ignorant of Biden to tell the Ukrainian PM what to do. China Joe still bragging about how he bullied the Ukrainian prosecutor to drop the investigation into Burisma, where Hunter received thousands for doing nothing except being the VP's crackhead son. I think he still believes that he can strong-arm a weaker nation like Ukraine into doing anything he wants, but different times, different Ukraine prime minister, and nobody believes a fake news anymore. Russians as Satan narrative doesn't work anymore. We know it's the U.S. who are going around doing regime changes and black ops to feed the military-industrial complex and banking cartels. Leave Ukraine alone and deal with the southern border, which is the real threat and danger to this country. Good comment there from Thunder 7. Yeah, I think a lot of that feels right. You know, Jack Posobiec on Twitter last night, and we talked about the Columbia Bugle on Twitter as well, saying that, you know, it's like, my goodness, like what if there was social media back during 9/11 to the same extent that it was here? Because as soon as CNN posted that article and then they reversed it, deleted it, I mean, Twitter saw that immediately and then, you know, sort of called it out. So I wonder what would happen. Like, would this same consensus of people saying, what's going on in Ukraine? What is this? What is all this about? I think there's more transparency. We can see it. We can just go check in, listen to see what Ukrainian president says, what Russian president has to say. We can see the headlines from all over the world. People are engaging in, you know, live streams and shows like this and talking about these things in a way that we weren't doing 20 years ago. So maybe we could have avoided the war if we had been able to see and dissect what these lying politicians say is happening. Wouldn't that be nice? Miss Lucky says, serious question. What advantage, military or economic, does Ukraine have for Russia? Sergeant Bob, P.S. Good analogy with the DUI. So I'm not an expert on this, right? I did look through some history on the whole situation, and I know that, it's sort of like, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's sort of a cultural thing, right? In many ways, of course, it's strategic. Of course, we looked at the geography of Ukraine relative to Russia. I mean, it's a beautiful area. There's all sorts of ports and rivers, and, you know, it's sort of an interface into the other side of, just from a geographic perspective, I think it's very, very important. But in addition to that, you know, Putin has this sort of cultural longing for it. It's sort of like the same thing that's happening with China and Taiwan, this, you know, one China vision that's just part of the culture. I think they want that same thing in Russia. And actually, Heather, Miss Lucky, Three Girlies is here, says, Ukraine has a lot of advantages. They used to be the industrial segment of the USSR. They also have a lot of their military weapons. Ukraine would be direct access to the Black Sea for Russia. Yeah, so that whole sort of, if you look at the geography, I think on the southern side, there's like this big, you know, sort of port that connects right to that sea. Heather, Three Girlies, says, oh my gosh, the number one word for this administration is disinformation. Is there anything that isn't disinformation? Oh yeah, misinformation. So there's only like 3 categories of data now. There's official data, which is whatever the Biden White House says. Then there's misinformation, which is stuff that is wrong, that is different than what the White House says, but not intentionally wrong. And then there's actually disinformation, which is from, you know, seditionists and people like, I think me, I don't know. Soul Viking says, Rob, there's little confidence in the summary of the calls. All calls should be transcribed word for word to ensure an accurate record should there be any need later. I think a good need here would be to avoid a global world war, so we might be good to see. Says what we have now is, quote, not a real transcript, but rather something that can be reinvented to be whatever the propagandists need. We know how poorly the 502 summary process of interviews is handled by the three-letter agencies when there is an agenda. And so this is pathetic. Yeah, I agree with you on that, Soul Viking. It certainly feels like they just sort of concocted what they wanted the call to be about. And they just said, just put Joe on there. What's he going to do? He's harmless. He doesn't even know where he is right now. Just put him on the call. Let's see what happens. They put him on there and he's like, oh, hey, who's this? Oh, Ukraine. Oh, I remember you and my son. Well, let me tell you what's going to happen now that I'm president there. And then it all just went downhill from there. Not good. Thunder7 says, Rob, doesn't Austin know that Ukraine is not a part of NATO? Cannot be due to agreement worked out with Russia NATO over a decade ago. I'm sure he talks about that, right? He sort of uses the words interchangeably, our NATO partners, our NATO allies. I think he considers Ukraine to be a NATO partner or a NATO ally, but not a member of NATO. But he uses those words kind of interchangeably. Kenny1B says Budapest agreement was about Ukraine giving up its nuclear weapons in exchange for honoring its sovereignty. Good data on this. Another one says the NATO Article 5 agreement being referenced is narrow in scope and specific. It does not apply to Ukraine. So I haven't read it, but that's an interesting take. Obviously, Lloyd Austin is using that as a basis for action. So he seems to think that there's some basis for it. Grouchy old cat lady says, Rob, this reminds me of the situation the week before Israel's 7-day war in 1967. Second, I think Biden is just trying to get the public behind this upcoming war. They are burned out over Afghanistan. Yeah, and it could be they just need a new change of topic, right? Three Girlies says, wait a hot second. NATO Article 5 is not related to Ukraine because they are not part of NATO. And the money is not just going to Lockheed, it's going to Lloyd Austin's Raytheon. Austin sat on the board of Raytheon before becoming the Secretary of Defense. Lots of money. I mean, a new war. Look, a big global war, I mean, it serves a lot of people. A lot of people get rich off of, these things. I mean, it's pretty bad for the people who get killed. It's pretty bad for them. It's not good for the people that have to do the killing, typically not good for them either. And it's also bad for the people that have to pay for the whole thing. So war's pretty bad. But Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and all the defense contractors, they clean up quite nicely. And because the costs of war are so defrayed amongst the public, it's sort of like the opposite of the free rider problem in economics. There's probably a phrase for that. I don't know what it is. Miss Lucky says, why does not Milley call his pal China for help? He didn't mind chatting with China when President Trump led their country. Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder if he's on the phone with the Russians saying, hey, Putin, there is not going to be any problems over here. It's all controlled on my end. Because that's what he did back when Trump was in charge. Very good point, Miss Lucky Sergeant Bob. Kenny1B says, Rob, the real concern here is if Russia doesn't stop with Ukraine and continues into Poland or Romania, which then Article 5 applies and will draw the U.S. into war. That would be a problem, wouldn't it? Yeah, it certainly is. And so that's sort of why you have to, I think, game this thing out appropriately. And if Putin knows that there's no bite to your bark, well, is that nice? I don't know. Does that work? Dr. Ahmed says, what is geography lesson this Milley gave to us? I think geography lesson. Yeah, he's given us some education on the theater of war. Jupa says, Rob, it's amazing that our top brass will go out and speak with another country's borders and sovereignty, but will forsake our own. It is kind of amazing, isn't it? To see how quickly they'll mobilize for another country that really don't know how consequential it is to Americans' interests. And that's not to be offensive, right? But I can't imagine Ukraine is real happy with America either at this moment. You just heard from the president. Can somebody sit Joe Biden down and tell him to stop banging on the drum over there? For crying out loud, it's wrecking our economy. Everything's going to be fine. Geomancy's Game is here. Subscribe on YouTube. Says, I really hate that we are the world's police. I'm reminded of a Stone Toss comic that is someone giving an urgent letter to Washington about defending allies across the globe. And Georgia's response is basically, so what? They need to defend themselves. I understand the advent of technology has caused the ways wars are fought to change, but I've always hated the U.S. getting involved in other countries. If we have so much surplus that we send millions beyond millions to other countries, we are being taxed too much. Spend that money here. Also find me on YouTube at Geomancy Games. Love you, brother. Love you back, Geo. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for the good comment. Former LEO says, Rob, don't forget about the military advisors in Vietnam. Slow motion train wreck. Maybe it's time to switch horses? Well, I saw Zulu in the chat earlier. You know, many people out there are saying, you know, maybe it's time for Joe Biden to ride off into the sunset. And for some people, that makes them happy. For some people, that makes them petrified. And it's for the same reason. Because that means we've got Kamala Harris. Who's next? I think you know what side of the coin I'm on. Let's see what else we've got. Miss Lucky says, quick, someone competent steal those podiums. From Sergeant Bob. You know, somebody just go into Russia and run out with the podiums. Or if they what if they take Ukrainian podium? I don't know. It might be over. It might be over. I don't know. Kenny 1B says, sometimes you want to communicate exactly what you're doing to your enemy so they don't assume you're attacking them when you're not. Also a good point. I could be wrong on the whole thing. I don't know. But I think the reporter was seeing it my way also. Jupa says, Austin, Russia, you better not invade Ukrainian. You better move your troops back. We support our allies. Reporter says, and what are you going to do if they don't? Austin says nothing. Not a damn thing. Not going to happen. Three Girlie says, good Lord, Milley isn't the brightest bulb in the box. Is he advertising to Russia what kind of troops levels we have in Ukraine? Or is he advertising to the world that it's Russia shouldn't be concerned with the troop levels we have in Ukraine? And Lloyd Austin is just a dim, making threats and then watering it down to nothing. Yeah, so, okay. That's basically how I listened to the whole thing. I was just, who are these two guys and what are they intending to accomplish here? Because this is pretty bad. Captain Jim, our in-house Russian, says, hey, Rob, I'd say Russia has made significant gains from this thing. NATO added batches of countries over the years, expanding its membership eastward, and pretty much stonewalled Russia when it raised diplomatic concerns over it. Now, not only is Russia negotiating directly with the U.S. over this, and NATO has taken notice, but the U.S. has actually given it some concrete proposals. Really curious what's in there. 10 years ago, this would have been hailed as a major breakthrough. Now, not so sure. Russia still has significant interest in Europe, but its philosophy towards it is drastically different now. It's moved eastward, China-bound since. We'll see what the end game is. Hopefully, it's not war. Putin most likely won't be able to sell the war to his general population either. Nothing like the Crimean annexation 8 years ago. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I still, you know, I'm not sure if it is a in anybody's interest to have a global war, right? In anybody's interest, even in Russia's interest. You know, I think that they have certain security concerns, absolutely. But if they're able to sort of draw a hard line on this thing, and, you know, this is kind of like a game of poker, right? They're saying, look, if you continue pushing, we're going to push. And both sides have come to this line. If they can come to an agreement, and like Captain Jim is saying here, Russia gains something out of this in terms of some concessions or at least some, you know, an agreement to not continue their march one direction, then that might be a win for Russia. But is a global war something that anybody wins from these days? I mean, what does anybody want that? I'm not sure. Jupa says, if the Russian playbook is to expose the administration's incompetence, well, it's working. They're doing a good job of that. And let's see what else we have here. Going to do a refresh on this. Yes. Okay. Kincaid says, hey, Rob, how's this format working out for you? Less clicks. I still think befriending Russia is a better option. Or they're just going to keep turning it into this, you know, this boogeyman for the rest of our lives. Kenny 1B says, Zelensky is trying to preserve his economy in the event Russia decides not to take Kiev. Instead, just chops up eastern Ukraine. Good comment there. Vientikis says, so which is it? Do we need to start a war because the narrative around something else is crumbling, or because all the military complexes profits are down, or is it a little of both? Also, did you know that Locals typically limits the comments to around 25 per page? The next button is pretty small. That was a hint, by the way. Oh, I didn't know that. No. So thank you for that hint. So market summary. Oh, Lockheed Martin, they're doing good today. They're up 16% in the past 6 months. That war business is good. We've got PWSMKAZ says Jimmy Carter 2.0 foreign policy and economic policy just waiting for the gas wars. Oh, yeah, gas. So obviously that, I wasn't driving when that was happening, but certainly I remember reading about it and hearing about it. PWSMKAZ says, if only anyone listened to Eisenhower, where he said, quote, in the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Yeah, I think, wasn't that from his departing address? Didn't he leave America with that? Kincaid says Rear Admiral Byrd has some thoughts on what the military is becoming. Way back when, World War I and World War II from Kincaid. Radice says, we won't have Kamala. She's going to the Supreme Court. We're going to have President Pelosi. Ugh. PWSMK says, can we make Eric Swalwell our ambassador to China? Well, he's got some experience there. He's interfaced with their government directly, probably many times. And he's still on, I think, a security committee in the House. Wild. Lee Fibbug says, hey, Rob, remember when Milley went in front of Congress and took responsibility for the droning of that innocent family in Kabul last year? No, I don't remember that at all. I remember him saying basically, whoops, yeah, we confirmed that happened. Yeah, it says, I noticed he didn't finish his sentence with, and I resign. But it seems people like Milley can freely admit to blowing up a bunch of kids with no consequence. Yeah, there was nothing, right? It was like a press release. Oh, yeah, that happened. It was unfortunate. We make mistakes. It's a fog of war. Blah, blah, blah. Good job, everybody over there. Ridiculous. All right. And let's see. We've got a couple one on YouTube from John came out. It says, hey, Rob, been hanging out in your Twitch stream recently, but wanted to shoot over a super chat and say thanks for the great content. Shout out to Twitch. So I've been thinking a lot more about Twitch, and I've been thinking about ways that I've got some ideas with Twitch. So there's, there are some people that sort of do like less formal things on Twitch, right? So like I could do like some other things on Twitch that don't require like all of the show prep and then still do the show on YouTube. I'm still learning Twitch, okay? I was talking with chairman of the board on this. It's complicated. I'm learning it. Because honestly, I went on to Twitch the other day and I clicked some of the people that are the most viewed streamers, and they're not doing anything. They're just watching something like a movie or something, or like eating a bowl of chili. And I'm thinking, I could eat chili. I mean, I'm not going to do that, but it's just I'm trying to wrap my head around it. And that's not to to be, I'm just trying to learn it is all I'm saying. Hot tub streams. Yeah, there's hot tub streams. There's all sorts of fun stuff. So thank you, John, for coming over here. I am actively trying to like wrap my head around it because it looks pretty fun. Like you can have these casual streams. This show is like a lot of it's very, very like no breaks. We just go, cram a bunch of stuff in, and there's not a lot of time for sort of like, chill and just sort of absorb the news. And so I think that Twitch provides that opportunity, which is fun. Okay, let's see if we've got anything else over from locals. I think we've got one more here. Let's do a quick refresh on this. Couple more. Yes. All right. Monster One says, can't wait until Donald Trump gets impeached for this, which is a great comment. First of all, I'm offended. Yeah. I mean, it's probably his fault because 4 years ago, his ambassador had that phone call, with that Russian ambassador. It's pretty funny. Vientica says, I sometimes say that a price of freedom is vigilance and tolerance, but its consequence is complacency. Whenever the politicians start beating the drums of war, it makes me think about this. And this one felt like really, really obvious and in our face, didn't it? PWS MKAZ says, don't get caught falling asleep on Twitch. Baddie streams. I could totally see myself, just sort of like getting lost in it, like lost in the work or doing something else and just forgetting I'm on the camera. And doing something that might be weird or something. I don't know. I mean, not that I do anything weird, but, but you know what happens. You know what? I'm sure Tubin didn't think that there was anything going on there either. Turkey chili, some people are saying in the chat. It's a whole interesting world. And so that, my friends, is it for the questions. Alex Watts says, Rob, I'll watch you eat chili any day, sir. It's not interesting. Nobody wants to watch that. Trust me, nobody wants to watch that. But it is a weird thing. Okay, let's go on to Twitch right now. Let's just go and see. What are they doing over there? Like, let's see. Like, all right, we're going to do like a reverse. We're going to do a reverse, like a reverse inception. Like, let's see if they're just sitting there. Somebody's sitting there just watching something. All right, so I went over to just chatting. All right, so we're gonna get the ad first, and then we're gonna let the ad play. Okay, this guy's actually talking. So here we can see. So he's talking. There's something going on. But this guy Hassan. Okay, I think he's actually playing a game. But this was the guy that was eating the other day. He was just eating like some chili. So they're doing stuff. Okay, so like there's some content going on. But yesterday was a funny thing because there was just somebody eating, and then I think they were watching a Netflix movie or something like that. I think. Oh, there's a second page of comment. That's from Vientikis. Did I miss? Oh, I missed some other comments. Oh, there's 2 pages. That makes sense. Chili in chat with Rob Gouveia. Okay, so I think I got all these. Oh no, my goodness. Okay, so these were a while ago. Okay, so we got more questions. Vientikis is here. Says, have you been following the James Webb Telescope? It reached its destination today at Lagrange. Started its deployment cool-down phase. Yay, science. I know, so on topic. Am I right? So I love that stuff, but I have not seen much from that. But that sounds great. I love space and exploration. I think it's a cool frontier. Shindog is here, says, imagine, if you can, which I can't, being a Democrat. Imagine watching Trump successfully appoint not 1, but 3 conservative justices to SCOTUS. Now imagine being told by conservatives not to be political or extreme in the appointment of a justice under Biden. Imagine how a Democrat would view the issue of fairness and moderation in light of these circumstances. If Lenin himself was a living black American woman, Biden and the Dems would demand a Senate confirmation. In it, these ways of polarization, our political climate is, it is in these ways that polarization of our political climate is assured. Have a nice weekend. Yeah. Look, I mean, this is a thing that's going to be happening, Shindog. This is a great comment. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this, right? Every time that the Democrats go out there and they start patting themselves on the back for getting very aggressive with their political opponents, for going after those Republicans and those insurrectionists, and they form these committees and they go after Sean Hannity and Sebastian Gorka and everybody under the sun who they don't like. That's going to be fair game. The Republicans are going to do that. It's going to be very hard to say to the Republicans, don't do those things, because that's how the game's played now. That's just the new game. And who started that? Well, they did. They formed this select committee and they started to say that, Fifth Amendment doesn't apply anymore. It's going to get bad. Newt Gingrich was even saying this. He was saying when the Republicans take over, you can expect them to go and start prosecuting these people who really violated people's liberties as a result of COVID. So I think that you're going to see both sides on this thing going after each other. We've got Vientika says, I'm guessing the phone call was weird because Biden thought the phone had hair. Or was the new cat at the White House. I don't know. Former LEO says, maybe it's time to bring back the A-team. And I understand that former POTUS Trump is looking for a side hustle, like saving the world from another war in Europe. And there's no Vindmans left in the White House to blow the whistle? Strange. 3 Girlies says, how weird it is for Zelensky. How weird is it for Zelensky to have a phone call with Trump and be a topic of impeachment regarding Joe Biden? then turn around and have to deal with Joe Biden. So you're saying, yeah, for Zelensky, how weird is it to talk to Trump and then be a topic of the first impeachment and then talk to Joe Biden? Yeah, weird. Weird for him to be on that, yeah. John M16 says, Rob, the U.S. was a signatory to the Budapest Memorandum, which gave Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan protection in exchange for their nuclear weapons to be destroyed. Since it was never ratified by the Senate, is the U.S. obligated to uphold the treaty? So that is outside the purview of my domain of knowledge, I can tell you that. So I don't know anything about the Budapest Memorandum. Is it a memo or is it a formal treaty? I guess would be my question. And if it's not a formal treaty that was ultimately ratified, is it somehow, incorporated under, some other sort of congressional statutory framework like the War Powers Act or something like that, which large parts of that were unconstitutional, right? So I don't know. I'd have to look into that further. It's a good question, though. Miss Lucky says, could CNN be trying to establish some credibility at the expense of the administration? Is Sleepy Joe trying to posture to become a, quote, hero and improve his dismal approval numbers? All is possible in the land of Oz. From Sergeant Bob, Miss Lucky's humble servant. The humblest of them all, I'm sure. And rightfully so. She's quite a lovely lady. So you two are just perfect. We got 3 Girl, he says. GMT means Greenwich minute time, 7 hours ahead of you in Arizona. We've got Thunder 7. Says, glad you are covering this with unbiased as always. I listened to Harley Schlanger, expert PhD in geopolitics. He said that Putin is not interested in invading Ukraine. His entire focus is to ensure no nuclear warheads are placed in Ukraine to ensure that Russians are living in a region protected. On the other hand, Biden wants to carry on from 2014 Obama policy when he removed Yankovic and put in a prime minister who was anti-Russian and pro-NATO. New elections took out Biden's man, and NATO is now terrified that they have lost control of the country, and secret plots and corruption, which involve Hunter, will be revealed by Zelensky, who is trying to clean up Ukraine, particularly in the gas industry. Yet Zelensky knows how vindictive China Joe can be and has to tread carefully in this matter. Well, that is some very good behind-the-scenes details there from Thunder 7. And so, oh my gosh, so that's what happened. I didn't start at the beginning. We're getting better every time, folks. And so let me make sure I see what's happening here. Wild Child. We missed this one. Hey, Rob, everyone, happy Friday. Did you see the kid where a kid from New York got busted selling all those guns to an undercover cop in New York? No, I didn't see that. He had been bringing them from Tennessee to New York in crazy numbers for a long time. I live in Tennessee. I was concerned about the gun control spotlight being beamed on us and the rest of the South now. Another case of criminals messing things up for good people doing things correctly. Interested in what you think about it. So no, I did not hear about it. Let's see if there's a quick headline on this. New York gun bust undercover cop, let's say. Let's see if there's anything on this. College student accused of selling dozens of guns to undercover NYPD cops. So let's take a look at this story. It says he went from getting A's to facing some time in custody. Bronx native Shakur Rodriguez, 23, faces a total of 304 counts. Criminal sale of firearms. Ooh. Well, these are some nice looking pieces here. Wonder if he was given good deals. Accused of selling 73 guns, 59 of them loaded, to an undercover cop. He also had a 3.5 GPA. What a nice student. Says that a merit page, he was one of the top 2,000 students named on the dean's list, academic achievement during the fall 2020 semester. Well, so what's wrong? Is it because he's in New York? Big Apple. Oh, yes. It's because he's in New York, I guess. Oh, well, looks like a nice young man. So here we have, got some good looking stuff, all right. Not too bad. All right. So he got, busted, and New York is pretty harsh on those things. Selling guns to undercover cops. Sold a lot of them, too, it sounds like. Interesting story there. All right. And so I'm going to go back up to the top. And we'll wrap up with some questions on the day. let's see here. A lot of comments today. And I'm trying to get back to the front page. Yes. Okay, so here, so we've got a couple others. All right. Where's Vindman now? We need him. Kenny 1B says, all the popular... Wait, did I... Yes, okay. One tough chick says, it's like Russia and Ukraine in couples therapy. And the Biden administration is the therapist who keeps bringing up divorce. But Russia is like no one said we want a divorce, except in this case, divorce is war. It's true. Yeah. Yeah, Biden is like really sort of inserting himself into this whole thing. And it feels like nobody wants him involved. Like, we got this, brother. Like, just go back to your basement. Kenny 1B says, all the popular Twitch streams are pretty girls eating or sleeping. Oh, okay. PWSMK says, cooking stream with mom. Hashtag meatloaf at Sergeant Bob. John Delar says, somehow, some way, Democrats will blame Trump for this, of course. Captain Jim says, Rob, don't be surprised at people streaming themselves eating chili or whatever. I remember a few years ago, there was a fad. New York Zoo live streamed a pregnant giraffe, and people were going crazy waiting for it to pop. My coworkers watched it for like a month, waiting for it to give birth. Crazy. And all it did was stand in its stall. It's back to the camera. but Captain Jim, but that's a giraffe having a baby. That's interesting. Like, I can see why people would watch that. But somebody just kind of sitting there and eating chili, which is, it's different. But my point is, like, there's like, as I'm going through, when I do show prep, I'm like consuming a ton of news. What you see on the show is like, I don't know, maybe probably 60% of what I actually look at, maybe less than that, maybe like half of what I actually look at, because a lot of it just doesn't, make the show, because I don't want to read it all, and it's just too much. We'd be here all day. So I was thinking maybe you could do some streams where you're sort of, assembling it all, and then you sort of, go off of Twitch and then go to YouTube and do the live show. And, so sort of balancing and, getting more camera time is the idea. And so I wasn't trying to be, like condescending to Twitch. I think it's a super cool platform. I'm just learning it. And it's interesting. I'm learning a lot of stuff. Heather says, 3 Girly says, rolling on the floor laughing, Rob. I don't think you were born during the gas wars, let alone driving. I don't think so either. 1985 was the year. So Carter was in the 70s. I was a Reagan baby. We've got Vienticus says, since this is going through its growing pains, should we call you Mike Seaver for now? He was the Kirk Cameron's character in the show. So, Vienticus, 2 problems on this one. Number 1, I don't know who Mike Seaver is. And number 2, I don't know who Kirk Cameron is. So I don't know either one of those people. So I don't get it at all. And I'm sure you probably could suspect that, because I rarely do. Let's see what else came on over from YouTube. Wolfgang Deo says, I physically picked up a copy of both Fed and Anti-Fed from Barnes & Noble's. Good way to raise awareness to our fellow citizens, which is a great. So he says, Wolfgang says, good way to raise awareness to our fellow citizens, which is true. The Anti-Federalist and the Federalist Papers are very, very, very good books. John says, hate on Twitch all you want. We tried to pool to gift sub 500 baby. Missed out on $1,000. That's on you. And so I don't even know what that means. But it sounds like I really blew it, which is probably true. That's par for the course. And guess what? Probably going to continue to do that again and again and again and again, because that's just part of my nature from time to time. So that sounds good. But that's a good incentive. I mean, maybe I really should get over there. A pool, a gift sub 500. I don't know what that is, but it sounds super cool. And over on Rumble, Vienticus, with a super chat on Rumble, says, let's be honest, if you started doing hot tub streams, you get a lot of thirsty girls asking for you to wear, inappropriate outfits, which is not, this is serious business here. Serious business. And so thank you for that, Vienticus, over on Rumble. And we've got some good chat over there happening. We've got Callie Gems in the house, Too Tardy. We've got Langster #1, Buttercups for You, Sedona Rocks 36. And so we're seeing some activity over there on Rumble, which is good news, because we like to be highly diversified. And so I think that is it from us, my friends, for the day. Let's just take a quick look at some of the locals questions before we wrap it up. I have a couple other videos that I was going to record. And so we're talking about, I can't even remember what they were. All right, so let's do a quick refresh here on locals. John Delar says, you're from Arizona. It's an important swing state. Sinema is an odd duck. How likely is it that Sinema would be reelected with Biden's poor approval ratings? I guess I want to know, is her popularity really growing or is it a lie? So I'll tell you, I think that it's probably growing. I don't think that it is actually a lie. Now, I don't have anything to base that off of other than, my anecdotal experience, just sort of observing. But what she did on the filibuster was a big thing, right? That's a big thing for the nation, not just Arizona. I mean, a lot of people really listened to that, what her and Manchin did, right? They are standing out big time. And remember that all of those people that sort of were really into John McCain because he's like this maverick person, right? All of those people that want that. That's her. And so, let's say we have Mark Kelly, who's our other liberal senator. Let's say if he goes away, he gets defeated in the next election. Arizona might be okay with a split like that, with one Republican and one pseudo-Republican Democrat. Or Arizona's going blue, but I don't know about that. I'm still surprised that Arizona actually went blue. I'm surprised about that. C. Reed says, Rob, going to do anything about the trucker convoy to Quebec? Yes, I really want to do something about that. So at our law firm, we work with a lot of truckers, right? A lot of what we do here is traffic related because in Arizona, traffic offenses are often criminal, right? It's not just a civil ticket. It's a criminal offense. And for commercial drivers, for CDL holders in Arizona, it's a class 1 misdemeanor. Okay, if you get charged with any type of CDL violation, class 1, which is the same classification as a DUI or domestic violence. So we see truckers, okay, who are coming through that get all sorts of stupid, ridiculous violations, and it's a class 1 misdemeanor. Maximum penalty, 6 months in jail. Now, they don't ever ultimately get that, and we're able to do a lot for them. But the point is, it's so burdensome for truck drivers. They just get picked on. And they have police officers who will sit on overpasses. Okay, so CDL drivers out there, be cognizant of this. You probably already know this. But in Arizona, they have officers who will sit on overpasses, okay? And as the truck drivers are going under the overpass, they will look down the bridge into the front of their cabin. And if they see something that, is whatever out of order, they use that as a basis for a traffic stop. And they radio their partner down and they say, oh, I couldn't see something. Something was covering something. So just go check on that guy. And then they pull him over and they do a full inspection of the whole stinking vehicle and they write him up for a bunch of citations. They get picked on big time, and it irritates me so badly because they're all good dudes, and and women, and we've represented a lot of women, good people out there, and it's frustrating to see them sort of have to face a class 1 misdemeanor charge for just a simple trucking violation, and they often, don't have the resources to have a big long battle when they're driving all over the country. They can't show up to court for a pretrial conference when they're from Maryland. But the judges, pick on them. It drives me nuts. All right, so enough of that. Let's see. Wolfgang Deo says, by the way, perfect time to send troll applications to Harvard, pointing out their affirmative action discrimination. If they decline us, we could sue them. Is this right? So I think that's to be determined, right? This case is going to go up in front of the Supreme Court this term, and they're going to have to decide on that. Thank you for that, Wolfgang. Aiden Hoffman says, waiting for Biden to send Hunter back to Ukraine to sort this mess out. Unquestionable credentials from Hunter. Well, maybe he can go over there and paint old Pootie Poo a little bit of a portrait, Maybe like a Russian bear drinking a bottle of vodka with a hammer and sickle, marching down the street to Lenin and Marx. I don't know. Maybe that would solve the whole thing. Hunter Biden might save the whole planet. Goodness, what a story that would be. Good question there, Aiden. Good comment on that one. And let's see what else we have from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Last one before we get out of here. And I'm on the wrong page again. Viantica says, yes. All right, my friends, I think that is it for us, my friends. And before we get out of here, I want to welcome some new people to our tremendous community. Big shout outs to Lovely Gemini who joined up. We've got Wonder Girl 30. C. Jones is in the house. We've got John. We've got One Tough Chick. Saw her today. Frank MC, Ion Energy. Wild Child was in the house. Alaskan 4 Trump. AZ Grayman, Mr. Shields, Nora MC. We've got LG00, Angry Bear, Sassy Steph, Ratbag 13, Ocean Lovers in the house with Free Mind. Humphrey's dad is here. Shiraz 31, Faradex. We've got The Brink, Lena, Piper _, and Todd Hupp is in the house, my friends. And that is it for us for the show for the day. We are going to be back here to do it all again on Monday. I've got some other videos that I am going to record and will be releasing over the weekend. And I think that's all that I had to say. I think that's it, my friends. It's been a good week. I appreciate everybody's support throughout the week and for being a part of the show. Before you get out of here, I really would appreciate a like before you left. If you're not subscribed, I'd love a subscribe too, and really a share. If you sort of, say, hey, we have this live stream that we do. Come join us for the live chat. We do it every day, 4 p.m. Arizona, which is Mountain, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. on the East Coast for Florida people as well. That would be very cool because it helps the show kind of grow. It helps our message continue to be spread out there. And it's a lot of fun, and I really appreciate it. And so that is it for me. I hope everybody has a tremendous weekend. Spending time with friends and family, unplugging from politics a little bit, letting the batteries recharge, because we got to be back here on Monday to do it all again. And I hope to see you there. Have a tremendous weekend, my friends. I'll see you right back here on Monday. Bye-bye.